Now, 4 games into the season, we are starting to get a pretty good picture of who this 2024 Chargers team is. A team that has a dominant defense, but if the offense can improve, they are not a lock to make the playoffs.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up? For 9 seasons together, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, it has been really fun to watch the Chargers defense fly around and make plays. Jesse Minter's unit is definitely for real. But on the other side, the offense is still trying to find some consistency. And if they don't find it, the Chargers will not be a playoff team in 2024. And I am very happy that the Chargers have Jim Harbaugh, and I'm happier that they decided to wait and forego signing Sean Payton to bring him in for him to be the next leader of this football team. And the Chargers have right now a couple of really, really good tackles, but are they some of the best tackles in Chargers franchise history?
That's a big question, and they're both really good right now, but they still have a lot to prove before we can say that. But today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. David, we wanted to get into our Chargers buy or sell today, as we do every Tuesday, getting into the biggest storylines and overreactions surrounding this team right now. And I think through 4 weeks, we're starting to get a pretty good idea of what the Chargers' strengths and weaknesses are and just kind of how good of a team they are. Even though we still have a lot of questions, we have a pretty representative sample size at this point. And I think there are a lot of people kind of wondering what they should expect from this team down the stretch. And I think that's why we get a question like this.
Hey, Daniel, David, this is Mark Fidel. Love the show, man. It gets me through traffic every morning. Buy or sell, the Chargers will make the playoffs if the offense stays this mediocre and this stout defense stays consistent.
It's a great question, David, because that is what this team has been. And honestly, a mediocre might be giving them too much credit offensively. And I think that what we've seen on the defense, a lot of it is sustainable. A lot of it is replicable. I think they'll be able to be competitive in every game and give them a chance with how good this defense has been. The number one scoring defense in the league through 4 games at 12.5 points per game. That being said, I don't think this is a playoff team, or at least I can't certainly say this is a playoff team unless we see some of these kinks get worked out offensively, because the Chargers offense hasn't been mediocre. It's been bad. And if they have this bad offense and they can't improve it, it's hard for me to have faith that they're a playoff team.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I'm buying it. I think the Chargers defense is good enough to keep them in a lot of football games, and it might even win them a couple of football games this year. But I can't sit here and tell you that if the Chargers maintain the level of offensive play that they have through the first 4 weeks, that they're going to be a playoff team, because that would just be me lying. I can't say.
So I think we're both selling it then, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but he's obviously saying mediocre offense, and I guess I would just have if they had a mediocre offense, David, if they even had an average offense with what they have defensively, it's a playoff team.
Yeah, I would agree with that, definitely. But they're not at average. I think when you look at the Chargers and their drives throughout the first 4 games, there's just been way too many 3 and outs, way too many lulls and stretches where they haven't been able to put together anything on the offensive side. And, you have to score points to win football games. I mean, no matter how good your defense plays, and we've seen it, the Chargers go out there and the Chargers defense dominates for 45, 50 minutes. But then when it comes to the end, and they've been on the field all game long and they're exhausted, and the Chargers offense hasn't been able to score enough points, what happens? They get tired and then they lose the football game. You have to have more consistent offensive drives. Got to have more of those 7, 10, 12, 15 play drives. And they quite frankly haven't really had any of those at all. So the Chargers have a lot of issues to fix on the offensive side. And if they don't, I can't sit here and tell you that the Chargers will be a playoff team this year.
Yeah, and it's very understandable what they've been going through, why they haven't been able to fully live up to the hype. But they were bad before Rashawn, Slater, and Joe all got hurt, right? There was bad stretches even before that. I mean, the Chargers have played 8 halves of football so far this year through 4 games. 4 of those halves, they've scored 6 or less points, including the last 2 games, which they got shut out in the second half in both of those games. I mean, the Chargers have only averaged 10 points per game over the last 2. They've scored the least in the NFL in their last 2 games out of every team. There's no team over their last 2 games that have scored less than 20 points like the Chargers have over their last 2 games. Herbert did miss most of a half against the Steelers, but still, that's not enough for me to be like, okay, that's the reason why this Chargers offense is struggling. And I just think that you're looking at an offense that isn't mediocre, right? 5th worst in points per game this season. Now, if they can improve it, like we said, they're going to give themselves a good chance, but they have to get to at least average, right? The 16th best offense in the NFL right now by points per game is the Chicago Bears that have 22.6 points per game. If you guaranteed me the Chargers were going to score that for the rest of the season, that's a playoff team for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But there's not a lot of gimmies on this schedule. There's not a lot of terrible teams, and the terrible teams that are out there, you don't really play. Like, I mean, you'll get a crack at the Patriots later on in the season, but like you don't get the Jaguars, the 1-4 Jaguars, or you don't get some of these other really bad teams that are out there. There's not a lot of gimmies. So they're going to have to be much better offensively for me to have full faith that this is going to be a playoff team, because I just think you have to be a well-rounded team. Like, a great defense is going to keep you in every game. I just don't know if it's enough to say, hey, the offense can still be bad and this team is still going to make the playoffs, David. I'm just not there yet. I think we just need to see improvements, and that's what this bye week is about. But like with the problems on the interior, with some of the problems they have in the passing game, I can't sign off on the playoffs. And it'd be hard for me through 4 games anyways, but just this where the trajectory of this team is going right now. But I think another big part of what's going to kind of be the determining factor of that is how healthy they can stay, which is, I think, where this next buy or sell from Arc of Darkness comes from. Buy or sell, the Chargers were able to get healthy during the bye week, and we'll have 5 names or less on the injury report heading into the Broncos game. David, if I saw 5 names or less, I would be ecstatic. Do you think we could see it?
Now, if you're sitting here telling me 5 or less names on the injury report, period, or just 5 players being out for the game, that I think those would be 2 completely different questions. But according to Daniel Popper here, he said that Rashawn Slater was working off to the side on practice, but also so was Christian Fulton, Jasir Taylor, Dean Leonard, DJ Chark. Junior Colson did return to practice, and also Joey Bosa came out and did some stretching a little bit later after everybody else. So, yeah. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 names on that list. So I think there's absolutely no way that they're going to have less than 5 names on that list. Now, hopefully they have the majority of those guys ready to play on Sunday, because they're working off to the side right now, as we're recording this on a Monday night. That's not the worst thing in the world. As we get closer to game time and they start getting, more practice time in, then I think that's more when we can properly evaluate this. But hopefully the bye week was able to get some of those key pieces back. Hopefully you have a Rashawn Slater. We already know Joe Alt's back at practice, and hopefully a Joey Bosa or a DJ Chark. Some of these names that are very important to hopefully the success of this football team going forward. Hopefully they're able to come back and play and be good enough to be sustained in that endeavor going forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's already a lot of names. And Justin Herbert, because of that ankle injury, will be on it no matter what. Basically, it feels like, even if he is a full participant in practice all week. So just 5 names on that list feels impossible. But there's some big names on that list, and there's some guys they really need to get back. So far, if those guys are working off to the side, is that limited participation in practice, right? If they're limited all week, could they have a chance to play? The one thing we know is all of these guys are 1 week healthier than they would have been and 1 week closer to getting back. But they're going to need them in a big game against Denver this week. Is it a must-win game? I mean, 2-3 sounds a lot worse than 3-2. It feels dramatically worse. But also, this game has some other kind of weird storylines with it, because at one point we thought Sean Payton might be the Chargers head coach, and I think it's actually a great thing that didn't happen. We're going to talk about all that and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. If you're placing bets on FanDuel, it's a great way to keep up with everything. So you have everything on one page, so you know exactly how your action is going. But you know what I'm doing tonight. You know where it's going. It's Padres. It's Dodgers. Lots of Chargers fans. Everything is at war right now, especially after that chippy last game. And we know it's a huge game 3 of the NLDS with the Dodgers heading into sunny San Diego after getting that butt kicked in the last game. The Padres have Michael King going tonight, and you can get the Padres on the money line at minus 152. So they're pretty big favorites, but you can also get them at minus 1.5 runs at plus 140 if you want some plus juice. I also love making home run bets. Anytime, home runs, who's going to hit a home run in this game, you can get the scorching hot Fernando Tatis Jr. to hit a home run at plus 310 right now. All you have to do is get started, and you can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet on FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. I also need to tell you guys about Hillsdale College, history, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Did you study these things in school? Probably not, or even if you did, maybe it's time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, and they have not changed the basic, fundamental truths about our world and our place in it. Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning of history of the Constitution, introduction to free market economics, the Great American Story, A Land of Hope, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, and a brand new documentary-style course on Marxism, socialism, and communism. All of Hillsdale courses are self-paced. You can get started whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. All right, David, let's continue getting into our Chargers' biggest storylines and overreactions on a buy or sell Tuesday. And there's a matchup this week that has a little bit more hanging over it than just maybe the division rivalry of the Chargers and Broncos. And the Broncos suddenly have gotten hot, winning 3 straight games. And I think that for this one, there's also the head coach storylines. Because like I said, at one point, we thought that, and maybe even hoped, that Sean Payton would be the head coach of the Chargers. And there was all these rumors when, he was coming back and they, would have to potentially trade for him, that he really, really wanted to coach Justin Herbert. And for good reason. The dude has every talent that you could possibly ask for in a quarterback. But the timing didn't match up, right? The Chargers did not get rid of Brandon Staley after 2 years. They kept him one more extra terrible season. Sean Payton goes to the Broncos, and the Broncos trade for Sean Payton, because that's another big part of this, is you had to trade for him. And the Chargers end up with Jim Harbaugh. And David, I like both of these guys, right? I was very interested to see what Sean Payton could potentially do with someone as good as Justin Herbert after helping Drew Brees get to a Hall of Fame career. That being said, you don't get Jim Harbaugh unless you pass on Sean Payton. So you're buying or selling that the Chargers not getting Sean Payton was actually a good thing?
Yeah, I am going to buy it. And the reason why I'm going to buy it, and hey, respect to Sean Payton, obviously he's a Super Bowl champion winning head coach. But I think what Jim Harbaugh brings to the table is everything that the Chargers needed. First and foremost, this guy is a culture changer, and the Chargers desperately needed a reverse in culture. Like, that was first and foremost. Secondly, he brings an identity, a physical, tough type of football team. This is what he builds at every single stop and has built at every single stop as a head coach. The Chargers are embodying that, and they, have done everything they could to turn into, what Jim Harbaugh is trying to create. And obviously, that's a work in progress. Rome was not built in a day. That's still ongoing in that pursuit. And then the third thing for me is, something that they both share, a track record of success. Jim Harbaugh wins everywhere that he goes, and he does it in very, very short order. I do feel like the Chargers are building something. They have that identity. They have changed the culture already very quickly, and I think that's going to continue to happen under the watchful eyes of Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, I think that if the only problem for the Chargers is they just needed to get more out of Justin Herbert, then maybe that's a way to go, right? Like, if you have like a Daniel Jones or someone like that, and you just need to get more out of the quarterback, you maybe go with someone like a Sean Payton that you feel like can get more out of the quarterback. The Chargers' problem has never been getting more out of the quarterback. They needed an entire culture shift, an entire kind of rebuild. And if you need somebody to build a program, there's nobody better to do it than Jim Harbaugh. And the Chargers needed a totally rebuilt program. They have a lot of scars they're trying to cover up. I don't know if Justin Herbert would have been the best fit for Sean Payton's offense. We kind of saw a small sample of it with Joe Lombardi, who was running a very similar offense to what Sean Payton likes to run. Joe Lombardi's not the offensive mind that Sean Payton is. And really, the Broncos this year have been winning on the backs of their defense, not their offense.
Oh, yeah.
And, even Sean Payton, who didn't get along with Russell Wilson, was caught in a shouting match with Bo Nix on the sideline last week. Bo Nix hasn't looked great, had his best game of the season last week, but he hasn't looked great this year. Russell Wilson was straight bad under Sean Payton last year. I'm glad they ended up with Jim Harbaugh, and it's not to even slight Sean Payton. I think Sean Payton's a good coach.
Yeah.
And I think it's still fair to wonder if what Jim Harbaugh aspires to build can work in today's NFL. We're going to have to wait and see it play out, but I think that was absolutely the right way for the Chargers to go. Not just getting better on offense, they needed to get better as a full-blown team. And the defensive side of the Chargers.
And the staff too, right? The staff
and the staff
Jim
as
Harbaugh
well.
put
I mean,
together.
totally. And he's made a lot of good decisions in that part. But it is going to be a really tough game going up this week against the Denver Broncos. But will it be Justin Herbert's toughest test yet, David? The buy or sell is this: the Broncos defense will be Justin Herbert's toughest test of the season on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Broncos have a great defense. That's for sure. They have some stars on that side, namely Patrick Surtain II, who is a tremendous corner. He really, truly is. But with that being said, I'm going to sell it. I do not feel like it is the toughest test. And that, for me, is the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers had a much better defensive line. They have a way better pass rush. And, they have just a track record of being able to be a very physical, very tough football team. And Justin Herbert was already banged up and lost a lot of players in that game, and they had to overcome very quickly on the fly. Sure. So I just think that, that right there was definitely the toughest test. And hopefully, he's in a much better situation where Justin Herbert's more healthy. We already know Joe Alt's going to be back in the fold, and hopefully the team as a whole is just in a better mindset and a better health situation to be able to take on the challenge ahead.
Yeah, I disagree. I think this is definitely the toughest test that Justin Herbert specifically has had so far. I mean, obviously the game that he leaves, it's hard to, like the test kind of ends when he goes out of the game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously. But it's the best corner they've played so far in Patrick Surtain II. It's the best scoring defense they've played so far. They're second only behind the Chargers. The Chargers have given up 12.5 points. The Broncos have given up 14.6 points. They have the fifth least passing yards allowed in the NFL so far this season, which is better than the Steelers, better than Kansas City, who they played this year. They also are third in the league in sacks. They have more sacks than the Pittsburgh Steelers do as well. And they're tied for sixth in the league in interceptions. That's the only place that Pittsburgh actually leads them in any of those categories. So to me, this is the toughest test. You also combine it with the fact that you're playing in Mile High Stadium in Denver. Justin Herbert's had success in Pittsburgh. He hasn't had a ton of success in Denver. He hasn't won there yet in his career. So that's for me why I think this is absolutely the toughest test and not a game the Chargers should be taking lightly. It's very important. But is it a must-win game? And that's the next buy or sell here, David. Very early in the season, very important game. But buy or sell the Chargers Week 6 game in Denver is a must-win.
I mean, when you look at this game, like this is a division game, right? And you're going into this off of a 2-game losing streak where the Chargers have not been able to run the ball at all. And their defense has been put out there a ton. Is this a must win? No, it's not a must win. So I'm going to sell the fact that it's a must win because there are a lot of games still left on the docket. Still very, very important. And I do feel like this is a game that could, really spearhead you into the rest of your season if you're able to pick up a big win on the road in a place where you haven't had a lot of success. Like, I think this would be a big kind of defining win going forward for the Chargers, but I don't think it's a must win at this point in time.
Yeah, I don't think you can have a must win through 4 games going into your 5th game unless you're 0-4 or 1-3. Like, hey, if the Chargers were 1-3 at this point, maybe it would feel like a must-win game for them because it's very hard to come back from that as some of the teams, the Jaguars, the Bengals, and some good teams we've seen in the past. We'll have to see what they can do after this. I mean, they're only obviously 1 win away from where the Chargers are at now. But like I said before, the difference between 2-3 and 3-2 feels gigantic. It also is depending on, deciding whether you're 2-1 or 1-2 inside the division. Kansas City already has, 5 wins this season? They're 5-0, right?
Yep.
You're already behind them. You don't want to send the Broncos to 4-2 and be even further behind them. So it's a very, very important game. It's not a must-win game. Your season's not over if you lose, but it's a huge game, and it's going to be an incredibly tough test. I'm honestly a little bit surprised that they're favorites going into this. It feels like a push kind of a game. Like this, 2 very good defenses, 2 offenses that have been struggling. but one team, plays in Denver and gets to play in their home field, which has one of the biggest advantages of any home field in the NFL. So excited to watch it, nervous to watch it. It's going to be incredibly tough for this Chargers offense, but they could prove a lot to us in this game. And we'll see if they have their top tackles back, which would make a gigantic difference. But are Joe Walton and Rashawn Slater already two of the best tackles in franchise history? That's what Athir thinks. So we're going to talk about that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys about GameTime, because GameTime, you can get tickets for whatever you need to do anytime for whatever kind of event you're looking to do. You can get sports tickets, you can get theater, comedy, whatever you're looking for. GameTime is the best place to go, because GameTime also has a new feature called GameTime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. GameTime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And I know there's a lot of Dodgers and Padres fans that are listening to this show right now. I can't tell you there's going to be a better atmosphere than what you're going to see tonight. I went last week with Game Time, got 2 field level tickets for about $300 with the all-in pricing on it. Loved it. No surprises at checkout. Got one of the Game Time picks is what it was under. And it was just the best memories. Like, you can't pay for moments like that, but you can get the best price on those moments with Game Time. All you have to do, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. David, we have more Chargers storylines and overreactions to get into, but I do want to thank all of the listeners, especially today, for making us your first listen. We appreciate the everydayers out there. But if you need a second listen, make sure you go check out what's going on at Locked On NFL, who now have 2 shows a day. In the morning, you can get Tyler the Madman rolling, who's going to wake you up, no coffee necessary, or you can kick back in the barbershop with my boy Tony Wiggins, who is going to keep it real with all of the local Locked On experts from around the Locked On Podcast Network who cover their teams every day. So check it out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast from. David, the next buy or sell we have today is from our baby, Athir, who's calling in with another bold statement.
Dan, David, this is Athir. Buy or sell Tuesday. Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt are the best tackles in franchise history. That includes LT MVP season. I'm buying it. What do you say? Love you. Bye.
David, it's always hard to do greatest of all time with a franchise that's been around 60 plus years, right? Especially when I've been alive for 31 of those years. So
And
for
33
this
for me, so
conversation,
we're not there.
I mean, it's one of those things where my expertise is basically the year 2000 and on. The Chargers do have a couple of players that have played for them that ended up in the Hall of Fame on the offensive line, guard/tackles, as they put it. Ron Mix, maybe the best Chargers offensive lineman of all time, historically speaking. I had never got to watch him play live, obviously. And Larry Little, who played most of his career with the Dolphins, but started off his career with the Chargers. Both guys in the Hall of Fame. But let's talk about it just since the year 2000, and specifically talk about it regarding that team, the 2016 that LT won his MVP year. It was Marcus McNeil, right? And also Shane Olivier. And I feel like this group I could buy, hey, could they be better than those two? Yes, because Shane Olivier was not like a special player, not an all-time Charger by any means. But at the same time, David, we're talking about a guy who's played 3 games in his career, right? And Rashawn Slater, who's in his 4th season.
Yeah, I just think there's not enough aggregate data to be able to make this type of statement here. And obviously, hey, we've watched the Chargers for the last, 25 years. And, to me, like, there really hasn't been a lot of standout tackles that come to my mind that say, okay, this guy was really, really good for an extended period of time. Like, right. We just don't really have that. There's been a lot of adjustments, a lot of trying to figure out, is this player going to be the guy? Is this going to be my
and just a lot
franchise?
Of really terrible tackles, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Like Marcus McNeil is great. He's 6 years. He's one of the reasons it's hard to get carried away with Joe Walton and Rashawn Slater, because he was awesome. And then his career got cut short. Still 6 seasons, still the best tackle the Chargers have had since the turn of the century. But at the same time, David, like, that doesn't necessarily mean these guys can do that. But it also feels like they have the potential, like this year, to be one of the best tackle duos we have seen on this team.
It definitely does, and I think just from watching them and being able to compare that versus the guys that we've seen throughout the years, they look different. Like they obviously play different. I think that, with Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater, these are guys that have all of the skills to be at the top of their positions for a very, very long time. But when we're talking about best in franchise history, or, at least since the year 2000, like it's got to be over a more extended period of time than Rashawn Slater has provided in 4 years. Like we're talking, this has got to be 7, 8, 9, 10 years. We got to have a more substantial kind of data size to be able to make that type of statement. But I will say they both certainly look like the real deal.
And it's hard not to get carried away because of all the bad tackles we've seen, because of the Tevies and Storm Nortons and Trent Scotts and the failures of Brian Bulaga and King Dunlap. Like it's just, the list goes on and on. It's been a revolving door at that position for sure. It's hard not to get carried away with these guys. They have the potential to do that, though. They have the potential to be two of the best in franchise history. I think Rashawn Slater is probably second best, only to Marcus McNeil since the year 2000. And he's really played less than 2.5 seasons. If we really think about it, right? He's only played 3 games his second year. He's only played in 2.5 games so far this year, right? So he is that guy. We'll see if Joe Alt can continue his trajectory, which has already been, hey, I'm going to be an elite tackle at this league. How quickly that'll happen, we'll have to wait and see. But it does bring us to this next buy or sell from Edgar S., who says, buy or sell, the interior of the offensive line will feature at least one or more changes, whether it be a new starting player or guys being shifted around. David, you buying or selling that?
Yeah, I'm going to sell it. I don't think that they're going to make any changes to the interior of the offensive line going into this football game. I just don't see that they have enough time to be able to put that together. And I will say this, if Rashawn Slater is not ready, at least on the outside, to play left tackle, I definitely would prefer to put Joe Alt there, being the best remaining tackle left on the squad. But I don't think they're going to make any more adjustments. I mean, hey, the last person they put at guard, and Sam Mustipher was historically bad, like really, really, really bad in that spot. So I just don't think that they're going to be making any other. Obviously, they did that out of necessity because of the other injuries on the offensive line, but I don't think that they're going to make any adjustments on the line. I think it is what it has been so far.
I mean, we're talking historically bad. He was no Senio Kelemete, but he was not good.
You're right.
That's a deep cut. I think it was 11 pressures in that one game.
That was really bad.
Oh, God, that was so bad. Yeah. But I think the hard thing here is the guys, that you would think would potentially get a chance. They told you how they felt about him, right? The fact that neither Brandon Hymus or Jordan McFadden was the guard that went out there next to Bradley Bozeman in that last game shows you how they feel about those guys at guard. They, even with the struggles, have been smitten with Bradley Bozeman. Zion Johnson has been a huge disappointment this year. Trey Pipkins, obviously, given what he's going through, you want to give him a little bit more leeway as a tackle that's converting to guard. And because some of the pressures and sacks that he's given up have been actually playing tackle and not guard. But if you take the 3 of them out of anyone who's played 100 snaps at their position amongst guard and centers, they're all 3 a bottom 11 in pass blocking grade. That's really, 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 really bad, right? Like nobody else has a trio. I think there might be one other team that has a duo that's even close to being as far down the list as for those grades as the guys that they have there right now. So it is a huge problem and something that if they can't figure out, it's just hard to have a lot of faith that this offense is going to figure it out because it's been a mess. And the thing is we thought they maybe bring someone in. They didn't. So it feels like if they're all healthy, it's going to be the same guys as it was before, right? Because that's the only thing is they're expecting health. If Rashawn Slater has to miss this game, you're going to see some shuffling around. And I think it would probably be Joe Alt at left tackle, Zion Johnson at left guard, Bozeman at center, Jamari Sawyer at right guard, Trey Pipkins at right tackle. Yeah. That's what the pictures were at practice, at least last week when Rashawn Slater wasn't out there and Joe Alt was. Not a group that you have a ton of confidence in. Like, I think you'd rather have Jamari Sawyer playing interior, right? I mean, Trey Pipkins has experience at right tackle. But a lot of the pass protection and stuff like that, this is the time they can fix it. We can see an improved version of this. This is a time where you can work out some of those kinks, especially when you just think about how much of it is avoidable. Like, some of it's just getting beat by your man in front of you. Yeah. A lot of it, though, miscommunication, wrong protections, things like that theoretically could get worked out. They're going to have to prove it a lot to us.
Definitely.
But David, the running game has to get better. It's hard to imagine that happens without the interior of the offensive line improving. The passing game has to get better and is dealing with the same exact issue. So I'm excited to see what they can do in this week. It's a very important week for them. The offense has to be better because, like we said, it's not really a playoff team. It's definitely not a surefire playoff team if they don't. So that's going to wrap things up for today's show. We will be back with you guys tomorrow because it is your team every day. We want to do a fan mail show, so you guys can hit us up at Locked On LAC on Twitter. We'll put a post out. Hopefully we get some good responses for you guys because we want to know what you want us to talk about. And we always just love getting you guys involved. It's one of the best things we do on the show and something we're going to continue to do because we have some of the best fans out there. In my opinion, the goats of all goats. So thank you guys for checking out today's show. You can also make sure to never miss the show by subscribing or following for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listening to the show wherever you get your podcast from. You can also find the show every day on our Instagram at Locked On Chargers and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. Also, if you want to get your Chargers question and you want to do it like a good old-fashioned AM radio show, you can call into 323-524-7924 like Athir, our baby, does. So that's going to wrap things up for today's show. Make sure you guys are back here tomorrow for this Chargers mailbag. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.